There's a video essay called Understanding Snufkin. I should just save that for later.
Yes, much later.
There's at the risk of derailing before you even started the podcast, we could just not do an intro. I'm kind of in my post-intro era for the podcast.
Whoa!
We don't need an intro. Either people are listening to the podcast or they aren't, right? They know what it is. No one's coming to this thing cold, most likely. I don't know. But anyways, I guess I will.
All the Moomin fans. There's never been here before.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. We're gonna get much bigger in Japan as a result of this episode. There was an article on Moomin.com about Snuffman, which is like the name for the Moomin Snufkin friendship, according to the article. I was like, it's not a friendship. Let's be real. And like, there is a paragraph halfway down the article that's like, sometimes fans use this name for like as shorthand for an actual like romantic relationship between them. But that's never confirmed. Like, okay, we all know what we're doing here at Moomin.com. Oh yes, we're starting strong with My Life in Sex, the woman who has a thing for Moomin.
The title and then the sub what? Cal, you posted something that's very perplexing.
Yeah, sorry, I should have saved that until someone was midway through this.
I was gonna say we gotta go back and start with the intro.
Wait, I gotta know what the latex suit is. She made herself into a Moomin?
Yeah.
What the hell?
It's a big deal. It's a very big deal in the UK.
There's no picture of it in the article.
I know, I'm disappointed.
That's absurd. All right, guys, we do have to actually start the episode with an intro, I think, now. We've gone too far off the rails.
Good luck.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Googling Moomin latex outfit. 1 second. I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
I'm Callum Smith.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
This month we're dying as we look at erotic fan fiction and art of Moomin and Snufkin.
It's so central.
That's the podcast. This month we're talking about the second volume of Tove Jansson's Moomin comic strips, published by Drawn and Quarterly. Now, in case you need a refresher, in this set of strips, the Moomin family experiences winter for the first time, hires a paranoid maid, gains an unruly extra child, and gets religion twice. It is all quite bizarre and delightful, just like this podcast promises to be, given the way it has started out up to this point. I don't know how much of the intro Pat's going to keep in, but
all of it.
We are really going for it so far in this one. Woo! Cal, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's I think we were discussing just before the recording started that there's, for lots of different reasons, and who knows what the world will be like at the point at which other people listen to this episode. But it's been very nice for a variety of reasons to be able to read and think about Moomins, and at the expense of other stuff that is possible to read and think about just at the moment. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Been alternating between joy scrolling and doom scrolling over the past 24 hours, essentially.
What the fuck what did you just post? Oh my god. I was looking at wholesome fan art and you got Snufkin with...
And like a little behind the scenes reveal here. Again, I don't know how much Pat has or hasn't kept in the intro at this point. Like, before we started recording, we basically just got off talking about how, like, so Cal just mentioned, like, oh, this is a nice little, like, wholesome universe we've been talking about. Oh, Moomin Valley. Oh, it's great. Oh, they're all just, like, gentle, soft creatures, which they're not. We'll get into that. Moomin tries to kill a dude with a tree in this volume. But we've been spending, I think, like, a majority of the last 15 minutes just posting, like, erotic fan fiction pictures in the Discord chat.
For a character that isn't even in the book that we're about to talk about.
This volume, yeah.
I know, I feel like I've missed out.
This is just for me.
I will say,
Oh,
and I'm not gonna. Huh?
Sorry, just thought Pat's. Sorry, I'm just
Isn't it
really
cute? I posted that
enjoying.
right as you posted the Snufkin with legs. My God, all the way down to the floor.
I haven't
This
clicked.
is
I haven't clicked that link, and I'm not sure I'm going to click any links during the recording of the podcast.
Matt. Will you
Oh.
promise though to honor the
Show
commitment to
notes.
the show notes? Yeah.
Put all of them in the show notes.
Yeah,
All
yes,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If I see something that crosses my personal line, I'm gonna cut it. But I feel like so far the majority of it, yeah, we'll just make it in. That's okay. Do
I think
children?
it's all sweet. That's the
Do,
important thing. It's all very
do,
well, like, sort of good-natured erotic art that's
True.
being posted.
So we were talking before this too, and like, so Cal, your child has like Moomin paraphernalia of certain like plushies and dolls and things, and like Moomin, very big in Europe, apparently big in Japan. I did some reading before this. I watched the video that Cal sent over as homework about the life of Tove Jansson. I read some essays on Moomin.com, which were actually quite delightful, and we'll definitely be linking to some of those in the show notes, I think. Um, I guess my question is, Moomin, what the heck? Like, what? Cal, elaborate.
It's really something that I was thinking about today was that recently Matt and I have been talking a bit about Mr. Blobby, who is a like an entity that exists primarily in the UK, and it's very, very difficult, I think, sort of having grown up kind of immersed in blobby culture, to explain it to anybody else. And it's maybe sort of vaguely similar with the Moomins as well, where it's just they've been such a constant in my life. Just sort of I can remember sort of watching. There was a 90s sort of Japanese and British sort of co-production sort of animated series of the Moomins, which I think Pat actually posted a link to earlier on. So I just saw another bit of art that's been posted into the chat. That's a very sweet one, Pat.
Isn't it they
You're
grow
really
old together? Yeah.
that's lovely. But yes, yeah, no, Moomin just sort of stuff is incredibly omnipresent, and also sort of exists in like a really wide range of different mediums as well. So I think although the cartoon when I was really, really tiny was the first thing that I can remember sort of coming across. Not long after that, started reading the novels, which were actually the first kind of proper form that the Moomins took. So that's important context for anybody that's listening and doesn't know about the Moomins. Tove Jansson is a Finnish woman living who sort of lived in Finland, and during the sort of 1940s, I think, is when she started working on the first kind of Moomin novels, and they were sort of initially written as sort of books for children, and became sort of very popular sort of within Finland at first, and then were sort of translated into English in the early 50s, I think 1951. Sort of took off in England, or like the UK, in sort of quite a big way on the back of those, and then in 1956, am I going to say? No, 54. She was approached to start adapting them as sort of comic strips, or sort of start producing comic strips for for the evening newspaper in the UK, and yeah, that took off, became sort of enormously popular. Sort of those sort of daily comic strips, and then from there as well, sort of more novels were also published, and it's been adapted into sort of TV shows, films,
So
stage
much
plays.
stuff, yeah. The Wikipedia page goes
Yes,
on and on and on.
yeah. And it's an interesting thing as well. This doesn't necessarily sort of overlap too much with the kind of particular book, the collection of comic strips that we're talking about today, but the sort of commercialization of the Moomins is just one of the most like astonishingly successful, I don't know, I guess, sort of ways to wring every single bit of merchandise that you possibly can, whilst also somehow not managing to, I don't know, somehow they've managed to avoid any sense of like overexposure as well, which
That's sort
is
of the thing I
I've
was
absolutely
looking
no
at. Is like
idea.
it seems
Yeah,
like it all kind of keeps the spirit of the stories too, which is interesting. Like, because it's all still owned by the Janssen family, as far as I can tell. Like,
yeah,
they still have complete like control overall ownership of the brand. So like, it seems like everything is actually implemented in a way that makes sense and doesn't feel super like sellouty or like capitalist. Like, it's kind of all like
yeah.
fits the mold of and the vibe of the original stories. At least in my own like brief exposure to the stuff over the past couple days, like trying to do research for the recording.
Yeah, definitely. I think Janssen herself sort of was like at times a bit uncomfortable with I suppose like the commercialization of them, but then also uh, as a result of the comic strips, which were just so extraordinarily successful, but also incredibly demanding on her as the person that was writing and sort of drawing them. I think she sort of checked out of kind of Moomin's sort of well before the comic strips were done. And in fact, her sort of brother took over writing and drawing at a
Yeah,
certain
just
point because
handed
she
it off
just
to her
sort of
younger
felt
brother, who is
happening.
also an artist, which was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Um, but I think she was then able to sort of I don't know, basically sort of take a lot of the money from it, and her same-sex partner, which was illegal in Finland at the time, were able to sort of fund a sort of nice private life just off on a remote island off in the sort of Finnish archipelago, and
Yeah, I saw
so
the house this morning in that video. It looks nice.
yeah, it looks great, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
yeah. So it feels. On the one hand, there is this sense that the commercialization of them, I think, was quite alienating for her, and I think she after she stopped doing the comic strips and sort of finished the novel series for the Moomins, sort of pivoted into painting, or like went back to painting and sort of novel, well, like writing for adults, and those books are terrific as well. Like some of the nicest, like just really really tremendous sort of writer in other respects, well outside of the kind of the world of the Moomins, but that they are so enormous, just really, really huge. It is sort of impossible to kind of get away from them. But also, that said, it feels, I don't know, there's something so sort of nice and idiosyncratic about the whole kind of Moomin world that it's, I don't know, I've not felt. I've never got bored of it, and as far as I know, I think most other people don't as well, which is nice.
A few thoughts on that, but I guess my first question would be like, do you remember your first encounter or like
Moomin.
exposure to Moomin stuff? Was it books? Was it comics? Was it just oh no, the cartoon you said,
It
right?
was the cartoon. So there's one that was, I think it was first broadcast in 1991. It was probably a couple of years after that my sort of early memories of that. But yeah, no, I remember just loving that. I remember in particular loving Snufkin, really latching onto Snufkin as a character that I was absolutely entranced by, and that has continued. And it also had really, really, really good, like sort of hooky opening theme tunes, or opening and closing theme tunes. I had a sort of separate one for the beginning and the end. And it just, it really sort of got it sucked into me. And then it was really nice, sort of going from that to the novels, which are just really sort of, I don't know, they've got a real air of sort of melancholy to them, which is spikiness and melancholy, which I don't know. I don't think I was getting from a lot of other places when I was reading, sort of children's literature at the same time. And then the comics, which we'll presumably start talking about at some point, I read those much later in life, and I think it was when Drawn and Quarterly started doing the kind of they started sort of publishing them for the first time, which was, I think, maybe it was about six. Oh no, God, I might actually be about to terrify myself with what happens with time, but I think that was maybe about 10 years ago, which does not.
I think it's
It
more
doesn't
than that
feel
actually. I think it's
as though it
like
was about 10 years ago.
15 or so. I think the first book that I have has a
Okay, well,
copyright 2006 in it,
oh no.
which is almost
Okay,
20
well,
actually. It's closer to 20 than 15.
dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Yeah. Hang on. I've got 2014 written down in the one that I've got here for the first edition, but maybe I'm. Oh God. Anyway, regardless,
Hold on, I'm
a
gonna
little
go
while
pull it
ago,
out the
but like
shelf.
much later than sort of any of the other sort of forms that I was reading the Moomins in. I think that's kind of one of the reasons. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed, because the comics themselves are quite distinct. I mean, like there's a lot of overlap, obviously, in terms of like the characters and the sort of the general ideas that are being explored in the general sort of world. But the comics have a tone of their own that I think is partly just a response to the medium that they're in, sort of daily comic strips. Sort of gives it a certain rhythm and sort of particular kinds of punchlines. There's not a tremendous amount of sort of melancholy in these, and that is sort of so my kind of overriding sort of memory of the novels. But yeah, really nice, and it was a really lovely discovery to get into these later in life.
So the comics are like a later in life thing for you? You didn't like come to them until they were being published by Drawn and Quarterly?
Yeah. I think they were relatively hard to track down, sort of before then. I think sort of Drawn and Quarterly, who and I think have done a terrific job on these sort of physical editions. Just like really lovely production, like just like a nice object to hold, which always pleases me with a book. But yeah, much later in life, I think for me. Certainly, like I think like after university, I think. So like that kind of period.
It's interesting to me coming at it kind of like the other way around, where because like my first real exposure to Moomin was when you sent the first volume over as like I believe a Christmas gift at some point. Like it started as comics to me, and so like the fact that there even are novels is so weird to me because like they're such like visually interesting characters and like animated, and I don't know. I feel like the shape of them is a big part of their character to me. Like I was gonna talk about how Janssen gets so much emotion out of essentially like a hippo face and some eyes, which is hard to do. So like the fact that there are like these novels that I've never even seen, and like you said, it seems like they're very much more concerned with big impending disasters, whereas these definitely have that same melancholy at time, but like a lot of it is just like weird dream logic adventures.
Yeah. The in fact I'll send you I'm just gonna post I'm gonna I'm gonna break the sort of
Wholesome
pattern of
Moomin.
yeah, this is gonna be some actual art from Tove Jansson, because the novels are illustrated by Tove Jansson, but they're sort of they're done. These were done probably about 10 years before the comic strips, and so the Moomins themselves look relatively different. They're much sort of skinnier and kind of, I don't know, a bit less hippo-like. So the first sort of two illustrations that you can see here
Yeah, slightly
from
longer
Moomins
and
and the
slightly
Queen's.
less round, I guess.
Yeah, but you can also see, I guess, from the landscapes there as well. Like, yeah, it is a much, I don't know, sort of more um, uh,
I think stark is maybe
not
the word I'd go
sinister.
for. Yeah.
Sinister is the wrong word. Yeah. There's something that's less immediately kind of, I don't know, wholesome and inviting about the world that they're inhabiting in
Yeah, it's
certainly
definitely
most
more
of the books.
like otherworldly than like a nice valley where people just like bumble around doing stuff that is bad choices but ultimately doesn't really hurt anyone.
How did Pat? What was your kind of first impression? I suppose like uh, of the Moomins. Were you kind of coming in similarly cold in terms of a
For
background?
the most
Or,
part, yeah. I had seen my only real knowledge of Moomin comes from the knife meme, the putting away the knife meme that you see.
I don't know about
I've
this.
seen
Oh,
I've
okay. Yeah.
I've seen that all over the place. There's a picture of Moomin wielding the knife, and then the next image is him putting the knife away, and people use it as, I'm so upset. Okay, I'm gonna calm down. Makes me laugh. So that's
Okay.
the like I recognized Moomin from just being on the internet, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting. Oh, that's
But
good.
yeah, no, I have not read or watched any Moomin up until this point. This is my first real introduction to it.
I love how many images we've posted in the Discord chat for this audio medium. The show notes are going to be so robust this time, you guys.
Timestamps every 30 seconds.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. No, I can't go that deep. So, Pat, having said that, like, what was your experience reading the comics for the first time? Like, what did you think?
I think if I were to have come about it the same order that Cal did, an introduction through the animation to the comics, I would have been more open to the comics. You know me, Matt. You know that I like a solid world building and a structure to build from. That is not what
Oh
Toby
no, that's not
Johnson
what's
is
happening
delivering
here.
here.
Like, I don't know how many times I wrote the phrase dream logic in my notes when I was putting my notes together yesterday, but it's got to be, hang on, let me do a control F. It's only 2. I should have written it more because it's just, there's so many just like wild jumps of what's happening. Like, it starts, so I guess we can kind of start in the first story. Like, the Moomins have never experienced winter, apparently, but yet their ancestors have rituals for winter. They go to do the rituals for winter, and Moomin Papa's like, screw this. We don't need to do this. This is stupid. And then they start the Winter Olympics, essentially.
Like, I think
This
I would have
like
been
3 pages? 2?
Yeah, I would have enjoyed it, I think, if I read it at the pace it was originally meant to be read at, maybe. Maybe binging multiple strips all the time just took it out of me. I needed
I
it, like, it
I don't
felt,
know, Pat. I feel like reading it like with
I
a
felt
break from
unmoored.
day to day or week to week would make you feel more unmoored because you couldn't go to the next one to be like, okay, this will make sense, even though it kind of does, kind of doesn't. It doesn't matter.
Well, I was just trying to, like, find any kind of a comparison that I've had in comic media. I feel like Calvin and Hobbes is much more grounded, which is ironic because there are scenes on Mars and everywhere else in that comic book, but it's still just a kid playing with a stuffed animal. I don't like, it gave me sort of like Peanuts vibes at times.
I could see that a little bit in that, in like the personalities of the characters. I think it definitely has a very, to me at least, European sensibility of just
Yeah,
throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks
for sure.
in a way.
Yeah, and I think
it's
part of my problem is the designs of the characters, well, are very distinct in of themselves, but there are multiple Moomin, and the only differentiating, like, the comic itself isn't colored, so it's all black and white, and the only difference between Mama Moomin, Papa Moomin, Moomin Troll, and Moomin
Snork
Maiden, or
Maiden.
what's her? Snork
Snork
Maiden.
Maiden.
There we go.
Yeah. Who is
Yeah.
not a Moomin, correct?
Snork Maiden
No,
Snorks are
isn't
different.
a Moomin. She's not in the Moomin family, but she is the same species? Question mark. She has a fringe.
No,
That's how you call it.
Snorks are different from Moomins, but I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you
Snorks are
why.
different from Moomins. What?
They can come in different colors. I've got 15
Yeah,
Different colors. It's a
here,
black and
guys.
white
I'm ready
comic
to
strip.
go. Yeah, it really comes through in this black and white comic collection.
But really, so there's a fringe on one of them. One of them wears a purse and an apron. One of them wears a top hat, and the other one is naked all the time. And there are very slight differences in these small little panels to tell. It's like I
don't know what
didn't.
else you
Sometimes
want,
I'm just
Pat.
like, and then
It's so
sometimes
easy.
there's some really weird, like, little scrungly dudes that pop up, and those scrungly dudes also look pretty similar to each other. And then
Hattie Fantons,
the
yeah.
Mimble,
The Mimble, yes.
the Mimble, and Little Mai,
Little Mike,
very
yeah.
similar. One is just a very small version of the other. I don't know.
Well, they are sisters. To
Yeah.
be
Thank
fair.
God for that, I guess. But yeah,
It's
I was
interesting.
sort of lost. I had appreciation that this was a thing, but I feel like it's like you start liking, say, Star Trek in the middle of Deep Space Nine, and you want to go back and see what the original was like. And you have like, oh my God, is this actually a good piece of media? Because you went back and watched some of the older stuff. That's sort of what I was feeling. Like maybe if I came at a more contemporary adaptation that is more, I don't know, sterilized for mass production, maybe I could. I don't know. I enjoyed it. It gave me a headache.
Some of this is probably on me as well because I chose the second collection, the second volume.
I don't think it would
of the
really
sort
do
of-
much to be in the
No,
first
it doesn't.
volume.
It
As a
doesn't.
person who read the first volume also before going
You
to the second.
you do get introduced to the characters vaguely, sort of. You get sort of drip fed the characters vaguely through the first volume, but it's not. It probably it doesn't explain anything really.
See, you say that, Cal, but the first story from the first volume is Moomin and Sniff basically trying a bunch of get-rich-quick schemes. None of them
Mm.
really pay out until they find Snork Maiden. Some wild nonsense happens, and Snork Maiden and Moomin are kind of in a relationship, and it does work out that they get rich because, like, through happenstance, Snork Maiden comes across a pile of jewels, and it's all really nice that they're living it. Well, nice. They're rich and they're living in a house, and that's the end of the first volume and the first story. And the second story picks up with Moomin saying, "I'm poor and my girlfriend left me and I don't have a house anymore. Whatever shall I do?" Like that happens off panel, all of it. Like that's the leaps in logic we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's good. And then within 2 pages, he's been reunited with his with Moomin
With his
Mama and Moomin
parents,
Papa
yeah.
via
So
them just sort of drifting into
we're
shore on a
moving
boat.
quick. We're making moves.
I
We're
mean, I
going
do
for it.
think these comics were. I mean, it's clearly evident that it's made for kids. It's made for a child to keep them entertained with fantastical nonsense and funny like slapstick jokes and stuff, which is fine. I get it, but it didn't jive with me at the moment.
Okay.
I mean,
So
that is in. Oh, sorry, Matt.
no, go ahead. You've got something. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say that I think it's. I think that one of the things that I've been reading about in preparation for this episode was that the I think that certainly the books and probably even more so these comics, I think that there is also kind of sort of like social commentary that probably passes us by a little bit now, sort of reading it in the year 2024.
Sure.
Where and a lot of it is just sort of commenting on kind of like sort of bourgeois society of the time, be that in Finland or sort of some impression of the UK at the time as well. But I think particularly sort of the final story of our of the
That's just what
of
I
the
was
four
about to
stories
talk
that kind of
about.
yeah.
Hell, are you
Yeah,
telling me the one that ends with Moomin Mama telling two different prophets that their stuff is a little unpractical for ordinary people as a commentary? Because I don't know about
yeah.
that.
Well,
It seems like
that's
innocent
it.
entertainment to me.
So I think that there is, there's a bit of, sort of additional stuff in there beyond the kind of slapstick, but like, not all of it survives 100% intact. The broader brushstrokes, as Matt I think just pointed out, definitely do. And if we're looking at Moomin's Winter Follies, the first story, I think we all know sort of jerks, horrible
We all
jerks
know
like
jerks.
like
Yeah.
like Mr. Brisk. They are eternal. So there's stuff there too that
I mean,
that sticks around.
definite
But
like
yes, yeah.
try hard syndrome, right? Like that person who's so hyper focused on their thing and being really good at their thing to the detriment of like anyone else who even wants to try to be into their thing. Like Mimble works so hard in that story to like learn how to ski and eventually does it and he's just like, no. What interests me are results.
Split seconds. There's a specific line, isn't there? And I'm going to see if I can
Yeah, it
find it
was
now.
actually just on the page. Competition results, fractions of seconds. And then he loses and she
God.
beats him. And that's not enough for him to like notice her. He's too self-involved still to be like, "Oh, woe is me." Mr.
So
Brisk.
that's probably the other thing that's worth making sort of note of as well, right? That although these are strip comics, they run in kind of sequences, sort of building continuous stories between them. Certainly, within each story, there's one. It might not be sort of labeled as coherent, but there's a specific kind of setting to the story. It's not just sort of each strip is its own self-contained thing, which is maybe a sort of difference to something like Calvin and Hobbes or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Where the universe resets entirely between each one. Whereas this one, you had presumably over the course of a couple of months, so one story that'll play out, and then at the end of that, there is more or less kind of a reset button that's hit, other than sort of occasionally sort of characters that pop up in one and sort of move into either Moomin Valley or into the Moomin's house itself. They'll sort of often stick around, but otherwise, yeah, you've got sort of just a rigid kind of like 4-panel thing for each day's worth of comics, and then they'll just keep building for presumably a couple of months at a time.
Yeah, it's much closer to a serial comic than like a gag strip comic.
Yeah.
Well, it does still have like gag strips here and there. It's all in the service of like the actual story, which we were kind of talking while we were talking about doing this book. Like, can the podcast handle talking about a book of comic strips? And I think in this case, it's actually really easy because it's 4 distinct stories, and like you can kind of divide it up that way. Whereas if we were doing something like a Calvin and Hobbes, there are like little subplots that run through like a couple weeks worth of strips every once in a while, but other than that, there's a lot of like 1, 2, 3 like story long strips, and that would be a lot harder to chunk out and discuss in any method that makes sense. Here, I think we can take story, and do it pretty cleanly, but I think the podcast can survive this, you guys.
Sure.
So we've kind of been talking about Winter Follies. I guess for me, the biggest thing in that one is just like, for me, the letdown in the book is that Snork Maiden is just so fickle in her like feelings towards Moomin, and like I get how that plays out for drama and stuff, but I just want Moomin to be happy. And like it's weird too, because like Mimble does the same thing where she just kind of like falls in love with like anyone who sort of crosses her path throughout the stories, and I have no problem with that. But I think it's because like Snork Maiden and Moomin are supposed to be a thing, although I don't think they're ever officially a thing. But like they're gonna move in together for a minute in what, the 3rd story in this collection, yeah. So that's kind of my big sticking point with the volume, is just like, Snork Maiden, come on, get it together. Be true to your boy.
I think it's part of the fun, I think, broadly speaking, that the all of the Moomin characters are like none of them are like tremendously deep, but they've all got like a bit of kind of shade to them, and they've all got a bit of sort of like depth and grit to them. So Moomin is sort of hopelessly romantic, sort of, but also kind of naive and a bit wet. Moomin Popper is, sort of, I don't know, adventurous, sort of, fun, but also just pathologically kind of like irresponsible and
Yeah, just gets himself in over his head every single time.
Yeah. And Moomin Mama is this sort of very warm, nurturing figure who is clearly like the glue holding everybody together, but also has a sort of, and this comes up quite a lot in stories, just has like a line that like once it's crossed, she'll just basically go on strike, go off on holiday, go sort of do something else, and that sort of tension within her as well, I think is really fun. Snork Maiden, I think is probably like slightly more of, I don't know, I find it really funny with Snork Maiden because she is just effectively there to sort of make Moomin's life significantly worse.
Awful, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's why I've got nothing. It's like
I really
Snork
enjoy
Maiden, like. So like the other characters, like everyone has kind of these like weird conflicts and capriciousness to them, right? Like Flights of Fancy is definitely how I would describe basically every character in the book. Yeah, basically every character in the book. But like Snork Maiden to me does not have much in the way of redeeming qualities. is where I circle around.
I think that's fun. I think it's fun to see Moomin tormented and sort of punished in some respects, as this sort of kind of soft, vaguely blameless figure. Although, in fact, maybe this is a good way to segue actually into. So in the first of the stories, Moomin's Winter Follies, which sort of centers around the Moomins staying, like, not hibernating for winter the first time and kind of experiencing that, and then they get kind of caught up in Mr. Brisk, who's a sort of humanish figure, who's come into the valley and kind of introduces competitive winter sports, much to the kind of horror of of most of the other characters, particularly Moomin. But I
Except the
think
seal.
it's fun.
It was very good at winter
Apart from the
sports.
seal, yes. But I really enjoy just seeing the the murderous rage all this, like, literally murderous rage that this drives Moomin into, which sort of culminates in something that, Matt, I think you referenced before, where Moomin attempts to sort of murder Mr. Brisk.
It is the
Uh,
strip from this story that has just been stuck in my mind the whole time. Like, while I was putting the notes together yesterday, I was kind of trying to call up like what my, like, normally we do like favorite panel or page or whatever, and for this I was like, okay, like what were my favorite like strips? Like what are the ones that stuck in my head? And like this one for me is, if not the top strip of the book, for like it will be in my mind forever, like probably second, where Moomin is ripping a tree out of the ground. I'm gonna go panel by panel here. Moomin's ripping a tree out of the ground while one of those little like shadow weasel creatures is looking at him in horror. Says, "There will be no peace among our women if I don't."
Peace among our women.
The second panel, he's charging Mr. Brisk with the like butt of this tree trunk and yelling, "Kill him!" And he's just about to hit him and like push him over the edge of this cliff, except he realizes that Mr. Brisk is already like feeling so low that killing him is just like not worth it. Like that's why he stops. But that panel of movement just charging saying "kill him" will be in my brain forever for the rest of my life. I'm pretty sure of that.
Well, then a couple strips later, you get the Mimble saying she's going to blow the seal's brains out if he doesn't do what she asks her to do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Emotions are high. Emotions are running high in Moomin Valley pretty much at all times.
yeah,
We don't do things in half measures here.
which is, I think, sort of what helps. I mean, yeah, they're all kind of like simple characters and like kind of archetypes, but I think it is constantly just like really high emotions, and like sometimes the high emotion is just, it's really nice to relax and to, like, sort of not have any responsibilities like that. Like it's not all kind of murderous rage and love, although that does come up quite a lot. But I think it's, everything is just dialed up to 11 all the time. And I really, Moomin's Winter Follies, I think, is my favorite. I think it's my favorite of the collection that we're talking about today. And I think a big part of it is that I think just the the particular heights of emotion that it goes for are so intense. There's the if you get to strip 72 in there as well, which is another bit sort of just a bit further on, where Mr. Brisk sort of like having been sort of beaten in a snowball fight by the seal, sort of it sort of hard cuts from kind of Moomin getting some hot cocoa in bed to Mr. Brisk trying to throw himself off the top of a mountain because he
And
lost a
causing an
snowball fight.
avalanche as a result.
Yeah, so good. It's so good, and it's got really good stuff for the Mimble as well. The in strip 77 as well, which is where sort of Moomin and Stalk Maiden have kind of reunited after uh, I guess she's become slightly disenchanted with Mr. Brisk, and they're sort of ostentatiously kind of reuniting in front of the Mimble, who's just sort of stood as a small figure in the background with a thought bubble that says, "This makes me still lonelier," which is, I think, a terrific punchline as well.
I don't know if it's a punchline. Is it a punchline? Punchlines are supposed to be funny. It's just sad.
Do you not think that? I think that's incredibly funny. I think that there is something that is just so consistently unrequited about every single love that the Mimble has that I really like. And I think strips in general really benefit, I think, from the fact that Tove Jansson, who is a Swedish-speaking Finn, so like English was her third language, she wrote like there was no translator for these strips as well, which just means that occasionally, I mean, they're written incredibly well. Like you know, you don't. It's not something that you would necessarily assume that like that they've been written sort of directly in English by her, but it does mean that you do just get some slightly odd turns of phrase
Yeah, they're
at
just like
times that just
slightly
really
like
helps.
punchier or blunter or like not quite. Yeah,
Yeah,
like a little bit off, like off, but in a way that makes them hit like a little bit differently. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, I think This Makes Me Still Lonelier is one of those that's just like just like 5 degrees off from what you might assume a native English speaker would write. And there's another one as well earlier in this collection where the Mimbles sort of talking about what is it? About how Mr. Brisk has sort of revealed to her that they're all sort of degenerate weaklings because they don't know about skiing yet. What is it? Yeah.
Oh, it's 28. It's on page 14 because I had written that
Oh yeah,
down as one of my like favorite lines of dialogue across those two panels.
yeah, there you go.
Mr.
Mr. Brisk
Brisk
is
is
one.
wonderful. He has made me understand that we are all degenerate weaklings.
Then I really like Moomin Mama's response to that, which is, well, there is something, Moomin Mama's secretly, I think, one of the funniest characters in the strip as well, with just sort of continually underplaying every single emotional response to just sort of the absolute madness that's consistently around her.
Yeah, she's very much the straight person, right? Like right up until that moment she snaps, which happens, like you said. Like usually there is that point where she just is like, "This is too much. I'm going to do my own thing." But
Yeah.
up to that point, she's just trying to like do her best to reconcile everyone and keep them like moving. She's so nice to Moomin Papa all the time.
Which I suppose maybe actually sort of segues quite well into the second
Into the next
story, right?
story, yeah.
That Moomin Mama's made, which is where the Moomin family get kind of sort of peer pressured into getting a maid for the house, and then it all gets sort of quite complicated from there in
Very
terms
quickly,
of
yeah.
sort of yeah. But it's this one I really enjoyed. It's just this farce that kind of slowly escalates, right? Where you've got just all of these and I've no insight at all into the kind of writing process of these. If this was something that was kind of like mapped out at the start in terms of like how many sort of different kind of plates are spinning, in terms of just like who's lying to who's misunderstanding, who's got a weird dark secret. But like I really enjoyed the construction
Who
of Moomin
thinks they
Mama's
have a
Maid.
weird dark secret but really doesn't?
Yeah, who is investigating a murder that has not sort of taken place.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that, while we're on it quick, is my what I think I picked for my actual favorite set of strips. I'm gonna try to flip to it. Okay, so it's across 43 and 44. It's strips 58 and 59 in that. And it's where the detective shows up, looks at where Moomin Mama has spilled the jam, and is like, "This looks very suspicious." And she's like, "I'm sorry, it's only current jam." And the detective's like, "Only jam? Damn it!" And like goes out the window face first, like his feet are hanging out the window. And Moomin Mama's like, "Ah, how disappointed he was." And the very like the last panel to button that all together is them being like, "We should pretend we had a murder."
Yeah. This is the most flights of fancy um, any of them.
Yeah,
I think
it's very packed for 6 panels. It's got a lot going on.
but like it's I find it really charming as well. That, like sort of one of the kind of recurring or like defining features for the Moomin family is that they are just sort of like game to just sort of go along and like try stuff. And in this case, they are sort of constantly trying to sort of please a detective who thinks that they've murdered somebody. They're sort of trying to please their maid who's like very stressed out and doesn't really want to be a maid, and they don't want her to be their maid, but they're sort of trying to perform that. They're trying to be good neighbors to their neighbors. They're trying to, but like also just for themselves, have fun. And I don't know. I really like that. I think there's something very charming about like the basic worldview of the Moomins, which is just sort of trying to be incredibly accepting of the people around them and just sort of go along with it and sort of see what happens.
Yeah,
I
sort of
really
try to
like
make their
that kind of
lives
outlook.
easier. Yeah,
Yeah, easier,
but
but
in a
like
way that
also
doesn't
like
always work.
fun. Yeah. Without any kind of seriousness or like worthiness about that. It's just sort of like a very good-natured kind of, sort of wanting people to be happy. And yeah, sort of in a way that sort of seems to generate a lot more kind of friction and misunderstanding than they assume at the start. But yeah, I don't know. I really charmed by that, and I really like across this this story in particular, just kind of how confounded everybody else is around them. Like that very simple kind of philosophy and outlook on life of just sort of, wanting to have a nice time and be nice to other people, but is sort of incomprehensible to like most of the other people that kind of surround them in the story. The maid's dog, um, the
Their
detective, their
neighbor.
neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah,
I really,
yeah.
yeah. But how did you get
Being
on with this one,
being
Pat?
Moomin-minded, as Pimple calls it.
Yeah. Which is very nice. Again, that's probably one of those sort of things that you might not have landed on if English was your first language. Yeah, maybe you would. Obviously, who's to say? But like, that's
Yeah.
another one of those sort of turns of phrase that I don't know, really sticks with me. Yeah, Pat, how did you find this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I like the the bit where the entire Moomin family have put on masks and are pretending to be on the run from the police. Just on
Yes,
the
it
just
works really
cause.
well with their designs for it because it's just
Yes,
it's-
the Zorro masks.
yeah. I really like it. I think there's something that's really fun as well about the so although Tove Jansson had done lots of cartooning before she did this. She'd never written comics, so she'd done sort of lots of kind of illustrations and cartoons for satirical magazines in Finland. Nicely, I think for us reading this in the future, she was sort of very outspoken against Finland's cooperation with the Nazis or the Finnish government's cooperation with the Nazis in the Second World War, and did lots of kind of satirical cartoons about that. So very nice that we don't have to dance around her being on the wrong side of history
Yep. Very
for
good.
for this. Yep. Check. But it's really fun as well. I think that yeah, she's come to do this kind of like instantly hugely successful comic, having never really made comics before. And I think there's just lots of like nice flourishes that like I don't know, like that you get to see quite a lot of in this story in particular, with where she'll just do like fun things with panels. So each story is more is like either a 3 or 4 sort of panel grid. But like so many times she'll kind of use things that are either just kind of like relevant to the scene or are kind of like diegetically in the scene as well to kind of break up the panels. So in number 11, I really like that there's kind of potted plants that are kind of sort of lining a garden, or sort of potted trees that are kind of lining a walk in a garden that kind of break up the panels, and then just beneath that there's kind of brooms that sort of surround Moomin Mama as she's sort of talking about as she's talking about how she likes sort of living in a messy house, and I don't know, there's just loads of fun stuff like that, like visually in this story in particular, I think.
So my favorite one of those actually is jumping ahead to the next story, but since we're talking about it anyways, there's a bit in Moomin Builds a New House where he's trying to hammer a nail into a board, and so the panel like break is a nail like four
Oh yeah,
times, but the very last one is the nail that he's just like messed up because he hit it so weirdly. So
yeah.
the panel border is all askew. I think that's my favorite one of them, though I think the garden one is also cool, but yeah, I really like those. They're good use of the space.
And how did you get on with the deep dark secret of the dog in this one as well?
I think Pimple is my favorite character in the volume, which might make this my favorite story. I'm between this and Moomin Built a New House, and it's basically on the strength of my two favorite characters of the book, which are Pimple and Little Mai. Like, I think Pimple's story is like really like I don't know, like really nice. It's like uplifting, and like it could easily have taken a weird turn at the end when Moomin Mama's bad solution to, well, I don't know if it's a bad solution, unorthodox, let's say, solution to the problem is just to like paint a dog to look like a cat so that Pimple thinks he's playing with a cat. Like that could easily go the wrong way, but Pimple's like, oh cool. Well, I mean, that was nice. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's keep playing. So
I was trying to think of it because it's been referenced in things I've read, and reading it, I thought it as well that it's an allegory for homosexuals in a closeted culture, right?
Yeah. Feels
Yeah.
really easy to
Yeah.
map that onto it, I think, right? Like knowing what we do about sort of Toby Jensen's life, where that like being in sort of same-sex relationships for most of her adult life was like a big feature of it, but also something that she had to keep secret because it was illegal. And yeah. So I think it does feel kind of easy to map that onto it. It's not.
I was just
in
trying
this...
to carry that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna, it doesn't perfectly. It the ending sort of complicates it. I think a little bit.
I was trying to carry it through. It's like, okay, so Pimple is gay and has feelings for a species that they shouldn't have, which is like having. But then Booma Maman takes
It does
Yeah,
fall
there-
apart.
a heterosexual
it's like
person
falling
makes them
apart.
homosexual, so that no. And then it goes. So I was trying to follow it through, and it gets muddied. It was like, oh, I don't know what happens there at the end, but I'm glad Pimple's happy.
I think let's just go with you're allowed to like who you like, and it's cool if you like whoever, and we'll decide that simplistic version of it is the version that we have endorsed.
Sure.
But yeah, you're definitely not alone in that. Like one of the essays I was reading on Moomin.com about like queer themes and text and subtext in the comics themselves uses that panel that's in strip 54 of Pimple saying that he only likes cats, like as the featured image for the article. So it's definitely a thing.
And I really this story in particular is so full of. I think this has got some of the best kind of like punchlines to individual strips, and most of them are characters just stood thinking dark thoughts at the end about their terrible secrets, whether that be Mizabel or Pimple or the detective, or the or Mizabel's sister. But it's them. It's the story that probably has the most sort of complex interior lives for all of the characters, and I don't know. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and particularly sort of some of the early, some of the strips earlier in this story with Pimple in particular, who's got like a mask that they've put over their own face to kind of, I don't know, hide their, I don't know, I suppose just to signify.
It's apparently a muzzle, which like I've never seen a muzzle that looks like that in my life, but that's what it's called or referred to. So
yeah, there's one in particular in which strip is this 39, where the Moomins are just sort of having a good time and sort of dancing around, sort of being lighthearted and silly. And Pimple's response to this is to ask Mizabel, "Should I tell them their secret?" And they're so happy. I have
to crush them.
Yeah.
I was actually looking at the page before that in 34, where the quote unquote punchline. I think I would go with punchline of the strip is, "I do hope the Moomin family doesn't suspect the tragic secret of my life." Like it just comes out of nowhere. It's just the third panel. Yeah, like that's why this one gets high marks for me. It's just like Pimple and Misabel and the detective are just like so over the top, and I like all of them. So this one might be I don't know. It's close for me between this one and the next one. So maybe we can move on and start talking about Moomin Builds a House, aka the character find of the century, Little Mai.
Little Mai is absolutely terrific, and so just My son is called Anirin, and the sort of traditional kind of short version of that is Nai, and so we often also call him Little Nai quite a lot.
Little Nai,
and
nice.
it's yeah. And he's fortunately not quite as.
I was gonna say
I
he's so
don't know,
like
just
even tempered though from my time that I've spent with him. Like he's very chill for the
yeah,
most
no,
part.
he's not. He doesn't sort of radiate pure evil as Little
Yeah.
Nai does from
Malice and
panel
chaos.
one. Yeah. But no, absolutely astonishing character design and fun. Just to have this like little gremlin come into the story, sort of bite most of the characters,
The
just
very
torment them
first
for
line of
no reason.
dialogue, the introductory dialogue is "I'm Little Mai and I bite because I like it." Like
'Cause I like
you
it.
have summed up the character. We're good to go. Let's move forward.
Doesn't she fill in a very similar role as Stinky though? Like I feel like it's a more
She's a
palatable Stinky.
yeah, Stinky. I think Stinky's more adult, maybe in the
Sure,
his
she's more
sort of parent and
precocious in her. Yeah.
yeah, you can't imagine her doing like smoking a cigar and like making moonshine, for instance.
No.
Well, I suppose. Well,
I don't know,
maybe you
she's
can,
threatening the
like, but
police officer for the warrant or the permit that he needs.
yes, I love that. I love, yeah, just like the strip after she's introduced where she says, "I'm Little Mine, I bite because I like it." I love that she's just in a, she's occupying a coffee pot. She's very small, so she just sat inside the coffee pot, and uh,
That's where she is now.
yeah, that's it. Moon Mama's sort of saying, "Oh, but we make coffee in that," and Little Mice response is, "Not now," and that's it. The conversation is over. That's where Little Mai lives now. Ah, it's so good. But yeah, no,
I think comparing
she's
to
terrific.
Stinky, like
She's
Stinky's is more like plotted chaos, like more like
mm,
I'm deliberately provoking people chaos, whereas Little Mai is just going off, like maybe not even planning how the things she's doing are gonna pan out, but like she's only got excellent ideas and she's got to get them out.
Mm.
yeah, no, she's probably after. I think for me, after Snufkin, who again tragically is not in this volume, is probably the best Moomin character, and it is because there is like one thing the Little Mai does, and it is sort of vindictive chaos, and that's it, and she does it just perfectly every single time she's on panel. Here she is in 17, biting a fireman. She's biting Moomin Papa. She is tricking. Oh, yeah, no, the whole thing is great, isn't it? And she's I
Like I feel
suppose
like
she makes you
she's
root
not
for Moomin Papa and Snork Maiden as well. Oh, she runs off with glasses as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
she's like not quite on the side of evil. I feel like because like
No, I
so
think
here's what
she's
makes
she's
me
their
Mm.
friend.
yeah, like here's what brings me around is like so Moomin's building the house, which was Little Mai's idea, and like she's like causing chaos throughout the whole thing, right? It's like, oh, okay, you should use this as your cornerstone. Oops, it's a mile marker. Haha, gotcha. Like you should use this as your cornerstone. Oh, it's a hedgehog's gravestone, and you're gonna get
Haunted.
you're
But
gonna get
yeah.
pwned. It's like okay, we're gonna start building the house, and like Moomin's not good at it, but like that's okay. But then she brings out Snork Maiden, which this is like the one endearing Snork Maiden story of the 2 volumes of Moomin that I've read so far. But I think the thing that tips me over to like Little Mai not being a complete jerk is like when Moomin's missing the building permit to build the house that was her idea, she goes and gets the building permit. And the only way she knows how, which is stealing the guy's glasses until he gives it to her, but she's
Threatening
on
to
the
throw his
side of
glasses
good
up.
in her own way. Chaotic
Even the
good?
way that she does that, where she jumps up onto his face, grabs his glasses, and then she's so small that they are like 4 times the size of her, runs off, climbs up curtains like a cat, and then, unlike a cat, threatens to throw his glasses on the floor in exchange for, yeah, a building
Yeah,
permit.
for a
Which
building permit.
my cat's horrible, but it hasn't done that. But otherwise, there is something it's that just completely reflexive. I don't know. Malevolence that I think is really fun for somebody that's like tiny, presents as a tiny girl. Oh, Pat, this is good. Sorry, do you want to describe what you've just posted
Yeah,
in
I
the
just-
chat.
please describe for the listeners what you've posted in the Discord chat that just grows and grows and grows as we go. So far, I've ignored a lot of that. I don't know
I
how
was gonna
many
say,
we're
of
gonna
the
make
things
it
that's been posted in this Discord chat, this is truly not the worst of it. We were discussing about where Little My file lands in the spectrum of stinky to
Yeah, so this
good,
is actually
good to bad.
about
It's yeah.
this is actually about where I was at, where like I was trying to decide whether Little My would be chaotic neutral or chaotic good. And
Yeah, it's a
this chart-
D&D alignment chart that someone's gone and put Moomin characters, of which I know 5, 6, 5
There are
of them.
There are a couple that I have not
the
seen
9?
in the 2 volumes I've read, and then
Yeah.
Snufkin is not in here either. So yeah, you would be off at least 3, Pat.
Yeah. According to this, Little My is chaotic neutral.
I think
And
that
then
feels
Stinky
right
is
to me.
chaotic evil, which I
And
guess, sure.
and he's carrying bottles of stolen moonshine
Got the
in
booze,
that
yeah.
location, so that does add up.
Yeah, this all tracks to me based on what I know. The chaotic spectrum going from Snufkin to Little My to Stinky, good, neutral, evil. Like again, my minimal exposure. This all tracks. I don't know how Snork Maiden's neutral good though. I don't really get that. We gotta fix that one.
Is okay? Yeah, I mean, she's basically good, right? She's sort of mostly nice to Moomin Mama. That's pretty good.
No, I will say, like by
Um,
the end of all the volumes, she usually circles back and is back over with the Moomins
Yeah,
proper. She and
sort
Moomin
of
Papa
only.
have a like weird relationship that I actually really love. Like, because they're both so given to like material things. I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. um. Yeah. Oh well. Should we use that to then segue into Moomin Begins a New Life? Which is, I think, where you get some of the text for the relationship between Stalk Maiden and Moomin Papa, which is sort of fleeting here in the comic, but is still where you get to see, I don't know, I guess like how easily led astray both of them are.
The Moomins are, yeah. Like pretty much every citizen of Moomin Valley is, yes. Although it has one of my favorite just like images from the comic, which is pretty early on, so maybe this gets us into discussing it. It's strip 6, it looks like, and it's the last panel of that strip
Mm.
where Moomin Papa is just in a tree reading Agatha Christie with wine and a lamp saying all responsibilities are only a nuisance. Like I want to put that on my wall. I want a poster.
It's yeah, no, it's yeah, it's a really good fun one. This is the basic story of this one is there's a kind of I guess sort of like what we would in sort of today's lingo sort of describe this kind of like a new age philosopher that sort of comes to Moomin Valley, who's sort of encouraging everybody just to sort of do whatever they want. Well, a new age philosopher, I think that's like a tenet of Satanism as well, right? Just like do what you will.
Yeah,
Um,
be happy, be
but
free.
yeah. And it's just sort of see everybody just well, nearly everybody apart from Moomin and Moomin Mama immediately unquestioningly taking that to heart and kind of like law and order in Moomin Valley just disintegrating
Yeah, chaos
immediately.
reigns.
Yeah. Moomin Papa goes to live in a tree and then is persuaded by Stinky to start uh, making uh, start making Manhattan dynamites, which I assume are just sort of like extra strong cocktails or like moonshine.
Yeah, I
But
was
I
thinking
enjoyed,
Moonshine-esque.
yeah, I really enjoyed sort of seeing. Yeah, I guess the only thing that we know about them is that you make them with a still, and that they give you sort of horrible indigestion, or like they do something bad to your stomach. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well in terms of like obviously this sort of massively predates something like The Simpsons, but it really feels like good old Simpsons where there would just be where like Springfield as like a place is just constantly on the edge of hysteria and You know, it just needs like a tiny nudge, and everybody will just fly off the handle, and kind of like wreck their own lives, wreck the town, just because somebody told them to. I
Yeah,
like,
just a little push.
yeah. Um, and I really like that. I think it's a really, I think it's very funny, just sort of seeing how committedly that happens, and then I really like the resolution as well, which is the only way to really kind of get stuff back on track. Well, no, it's not true actually. Is it? I was about to say is that you get in a different kind of equal and opposing profit to kind of get
No,
people
but
back on
that
track,
one's
but that actually makes
also
it twice as
awful.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact,
They
actually,
have
that
to
is.
throw out pancakes because pancakes are too fun. We can't eat
You
these.
gotta
We
burn
like
the
them too
gruel.
much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's a bit. There we go. The new prophet has said that all that is good is a sin, and pancakes are good. Ah, what a pity. And then, yeah, now we shall only eat oat gruel, keep it burnt. Ah, it's so good. But yes. So the only thing that comes out, it is particularly fun that the characters, having gone through like quite a harrowing experience with the first prophet, have not learned a single thing. Just
Yeah,
immediately
decide to
repeat.
just buy into the other one immediately to the same degree. The lesson learned is not we shouldn't buy into bullshit teachings for people who just showed up in town. The lesson learned is, oh, living free is bad. We should live unfree.
So yeah, I suppose no, it's only Mama really that's able to sort of bring it back on track, which is effectively just by sort of telling off both prophets and making them drink a cup of tea together. Which again is nice. It's got the thing that you get with a lot of these strips, and I think this is entirely acceptable within a kind of daily newspaper format, which is that they will often like get to the end and then it's just like, okay, 3 strips and we're done. Like we're like whatever was going on, we are wrapping it up in 3 strips and then we are on to something completely new. So it's a very abrupt ending with Mama just sort of making them drink a cup of tea together.
Again, that
And
tracks
sort
with
of
the logic of
everybody.
everything else going on to me. Like, I have no problem with that because, like, so much of this stuff is just wild leaps of logic. Like, this is the one where we were talking about the like erotic Snufkin fan fiction Cal was reading to prepare for
Mhm.
prepare for the podcast, and Pat was like, "I'm missing out. I don't even get Snufkin, the product, like the inspiration for all this erotic fan fiction." It's like there's gotta be like erotic fan fiction of Moomin as Black Hand out there, like that whole little like twist in the arc where he goes off the rails again because of Stinky, and I think this shows the difference between Little Mai and Stinky, where like Little Mai is just kind of here to mess you up while you're building the house. Stinky's like, hey, you should become a literal villain and then go like assert your dominance over your girlfriend's rival and make her fall back in love with you. Which works right up until she discovers that it's Moomin, which again is Stinky, being like, hey, that's just Moomin. And she's like, how dare you
They were
trick me
having
into
a
thinking you
nice
were
role
cool.
play moment, and you just broke out of it. It's so
That's
rude.
not what was happening, Pat. She did not
No,
know
I think it
that
was. I
happened.
think
Oh,
it
I
was,
don't know.
Matt. I
No,
think
I'm
No,
100%
no,
with
no,
Pat
no.
in this. There is a real charge.
Snark Maiden is like, "Oh, I'm into this. Let's keep going." And then
Yeah,
he
but
goes
does
ahead
not.
and ruins
Yes,
it.
yeah, that's true. But she does not know it's Moomin when she's thinking, "I'm into this.
I
Let's
think
keep
she's
going."
into it, Matt. I think you're being too.
Okay, panel 3 of strip 30 is her blushing and going, "Him, how shameless." She had no idea, Pat.
Yeah, okay.
And
So
the
I
next
suppose it's not role play in that sense, is it? In that it's it explicitly only works as long as she doesn't understand that it's role play.
I don't know. Moomin put on a mask and introduced BDSM to the relationship, and she was into
yeah,
it.
and she was super into it. And then she found out it was Moomin and she wasn't.
Brought out knives, and she's like, "Oh, okay, how exciting!" Literally what she
Yeah,
says.
it's going far, isn't it? Yeah, wonderfully romantic. Yeah, good for her. Good for her.
As long as they're all getting
It's
what
good
they
to know what
want,
it's good to
right?
know
And
what
no
you're
one is
into.
being harmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
You gotta have a safety word, and you're good to go.
I really like the design of Moomin's love rival in this one, who I don't think even gets a name, which I think is sort of
No,
fitting for
they
like how.
purposely like. There's a dash where the name would be said. They don't even say it.
But he just looks like the Moomin as a character. I think is already like quite they're quite wet. They're not
Yeah,
they're sort
a
of
big
often defined by
softie,
like
and this
big.
guy is just
Yeah,
a fop. He's even softer.
yeah. It's good design work. I really like it. And yeah, great Stinky as well. I love Stinky. I think I was mentioned just before the recording started, is the only sort of plush toy that we've got for Nye, which sort of when I was rereading this, I was like, oh, that was a big choice on our part to make this the one that
What
you
a
sort of
choice you made.
clutches to his chest, clutches to his chest and cherishes. The one that we are sort of programming him to be like, to have some sort of
To
Associate
obey
with,
later in
yeah.
life, where it's like when Stinky says something like you should trust him because he's been with
Part
you
of
your
my
entire
identity
life.
is
Yeah.
this character. Yeah.
You now feel like you're like nice Stinky plushie, like might be whispering in Nye's ear at night, like every night,
Yeah, yeah.
because you
Telling him
might
where
want
the
to check
matches
it out.
That's right.
Yeah, weird. How to make Manhattan Dynamite.
are.
I do think Stinky is probably my favorite character.
Stinky's great. I really, really like Stinky. And even and again, just down to the fact that their name is like, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. It's nice where you just see a character that is exactly one thing and they're doing it very well. And Stinky is like Stinky in just every single respect. And like the character design, I think, is great as well. Just this weird, horrible little ball. I don't know, like the weird sort of antenna that he's got as well. Great. Never
Yep.
explained. Nobody else has anything remotely like it. Perfect. No
So
notes on that
in
at
my
all.
reading, it seemed like a decent amount of the characters in the stories are like at least somewhat based on people from
Yes.
Tove Jansson's life. So like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the parents kind of correspond to her parents, and like who did I just have up? Oh yeah, Snufkin kind of corresponds to like a fiance of hers that she had. Like who is
Yeah.
Stinky? Like that must be awful to read these books and be like, oh no, that's what she thinks of me. I'm just like an evil chaos gremlin with a
Apparently,
big nose and these antenna ears.
Moomin themselves was like the first ever Moomin that she drew was a it was drawn as like an insult to her brother, and she was trying to draw like the ugliest creature that she possibly could to insult him, and that was the first Moomin that she drew. So I guess Stinky's even worse than that. So that's pretty bad. Um, but yeah, no, great. Love Stinky. Love the Prophets. I love Moom and Papa just deciding early on to go and live in a tree and then feeling entirely bound into that, despite the fact that he's almost instantly miserable in the tree, but just staying in the tree, drinking increasing amounts of alcohol until
Yeah.
the second one, the second
I made a
prophet
choice and I
comes
have
along.
to stick by it.
Yeah, it's so good. And just yeah, really good Moomin Mama stuff as well. Who's I just yeah is such a fun character, and I think again just the depths of her understanding and sort of compassion for everybody, I think is incredibly funny in this one as well. Just the sort of complete kind of like or not like blank acceptance, because like, you know, you get a sense of like how she's kind of like worried or bothered by what everybody else around her is doing, but
Yeah, this is one where they actually do cross the line for her and she leaves. Like when they all kind of forget Moomin's birthday, which she's like, oh, I'm
Mm.
gonna put together a little party for Moomin's birthday. Like they'll all come home today and celebrate Moomin's birthday, and then they don't. Like that's one of the instances where she just takes off. And that's like when they realize that shit has actually gotten real. Like they go home and they're like, oh, Moomin Mama took off. We messed up. Like we did something wrong.
It's yeah, I really really enjoyed that, and I really like as well that like um uh beyond the kind of like I suppose like the basic morals of, I suppose it's, you know, overall it's sort of arguing for some sense of like moderation in all things, right? Like that's the sort of the vague message of this story. But I really like that Stinky I know I was about to say that they sort of end up just sort of like profiting and getting away from it, but their secret stash of jewels and Manhattan
Yeah, all of a sudden at
Dynamite
the end, they're
is
like, oh, and
It's
here's
uncovered.
where he's hid all the stuff.
yeah
It's like,
yeah
oh,
yeah
okay.
yeah.
Tova,
But
you knew you had a thread to tie up and you did it in the last second. Good for you.
It's nice that otherwise there's no sort of consequences really for anybody, particularly Stinky, who is broken out of prison early in the story, and there
I
is.
mean, technically,
Yeah.
the jewelry that they find at the end, isn't that still stolen
Stolen?
from
Yeah, I think it might be,
jewelers?
but it's fine. They
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
insurance, right? It's good.
Isn't that booze technically illegal still?
Yeah.
But it's
Oh, yeah.
okay.
That's nice. And yeah, this is the one that has the nice note of Moomin, Papa, and Snork Maiden just enjoying the illicit alcohol together under the
It's
moonlight.
like,
Yeah.
Lovely. Great. It is.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that is like a good summation of the whole like vibe of the book too, of like life isn't easy, but it's full of variety. Like
Mm.
they get by. They get by doing these wacky things to keep themselves moving and interested and like enjoying life. So yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. It's really good. I really love it. Like I've for quite a while now. I've been. I think. Yeah, I spend so much time reading comics and reading about comics, and there are kind of certain avenues that I feel like I've just entirely exhausted in terms of like what's out there that I myself am going to enjoy and be interested in. So there are kind of big pillars, particularly of like Western comics, of like things like superhero comics that I feel quite tapped out on. And it is
Hell, you
really
didn't
kind
read
of
the X-Men relaunch this week? Come on.
I chose not
I
to
didn't either.
do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like yeah, that's it. Like there's lots of there's still loads of stuff that's been published today that like I really enjoy, really get into, like just new books, not necessarily superhero, but just sort of loads of contemporary stuff that's coming out that I'm really enjoying. But I more and more sort of find myself having to be like, okay, what are types of things that I haven't really dove into, no, like sort of dived into that much, and one of the big things that like for the last few years now I've been really trying to dig into is kind of strip comics in particular, and kind of like older ones, because it's such a big part of the genesis of comics as a medium, and it's really nice, like just going back to something like these Moomin comics, going back best part of 100 years, and sort of seeing stuff that is like recognizable, funny, like stands up massively well today, is doing like interesting, innovative things, certainly for the time, and I don't know, it's been really good. I think like the initial book that I was sort of thinking about, is this what I would like to bring to discuss, was the Crazy Cat and Ignatz strip comics by George Herriman, which is like even older. They're from like the 1910s. But I couldn't work out how we would like sustain a conversation about them, because they are so experimental in a way that feels like if you published it today, I would think like this is groundbreaking, avant-garde, sort of comics. But I don't know. It's just it's such like a fun way to read comics, and I really like the rhythm of these. I really like just the constant kind of like is always moving forward. Sort of just the rhythm, the kind of propulsiveness of them is so much fun, and it's I don't know. Yeah. It's just been such a nice couple of years of really trying to expand out sort of my horizons with this sort of particular form of comics. And so one of the things I really wanted to ask you two about was kind of your history and experience with strip comics as well, because I think it's there are big ones that like I'm familiar with from the US in particular, that I think are particularly big in the US, that I've still not touched at all. Like I don't think I've read a single Calvin and Hobbes comic strip or Peanuts.
What?
Yeah. So like they're both on my to-do list. Like Ruth, my partner, had lots of those sort of around the house when she was growing up. So it's not like that they weren't present in the UK. It's just for whatever reason I never came across them. But yeah, like for you two, like what's your kind of background and interests with strip comics?
You want to go first?
I mean, Calvin and Hobbes for sure is one that I most gravitated towards. I also like Far Side. It's not quite.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly just one panel for Far Side. Occasionally,
a panel comic.
okay, occasionally they do multiple panels for certain jokes, but I really enjoyed those. But yeah, Calvin and Hobbes is probably the closest I can get to.
Yeah, I guess like I don't know. We used to get more when I was a kid, I guess, like at my grandparents' house, like the Sunday comics always come as like comic strips, obviously. So I would read some of the stuff that was in there, and like you get the ones that are your favorites, and you get the ones that you're just never gonna look at. Like I always really liked Pickles. Pickles is interesting, which I don't know if you've even heard of that one, Cal.
No, I've
But
not.
it's just like it's like it's not gonna sound good when I describe it to you, but it's like an old man and his wife and their grandkid, and they just get up to like little nonsense strip like this. It's not a serial strip, it's just a punchline strip. Like it's always just a gag
Yeah.
strip, but like they're usually funny, and like Zitz was usually okay. Foxtrot was a big one for me. I liked Foxtrot a lot because I really like their like weird family dynamics.
I liked
Like-
Opus the Penguin.
I don't know if I read much Opus the Penguin.
Penguins
but like,
were a big deal for me when I was a kid. I don't know. I really liked them.
I've not
like-
heard of a single one of these. This is exciting.
yeah. Welcome to what the like discovering Moomin was like, where it's like I don't know anything about this. Oh, there's a theme park. What? So like yeah, those Calvin and Hobbes I think is 100% hands down my favorite strips. Pearls Before Swine also very good. That's like
good
a
one too.
I've
Yeah.
heard about that
relatively
one.
recent one actually, even though that's from like at least 25 years ago at this point, because that's how newspaper strips run, is like the new ones are all 5 years old or whatever already. But I mean web comics is a like in some respects like a comic strip thing too. Like that's how when I was keeping up with the more recent Nancy stuff, I was keeping up with it online. I just did like a big read of Dan, I'm gonna say his name wrong, Scotty's Flash Gordon strips, which he just picked up like
Yeah, I've
in
got that on my
November.
to-do
'Cause-
list.
Oh, they're good. They're pretty good. Wrote a
Yeah.
blog post about it. It'll come out. But like that's part of why you were talking about the rhythm of like the 3 to 4 panel like strip structure. And I think Scotty does it very well. That can't be how you say that name. I'm
I think it's
apologizing right now. But
he was on War Rock at Ajax recently, and they said his name there, and I was like, that is not how I thought that was pronounced. So before I'd heard it, but then I've ditched the knowledge from my brain of how it is actually pronounced. So all I can remember is wrong ways.
damn it, one of us could have known at least. But like the rhythm of the strip is really good there, and I think this is more so important in a serial strip like those Flash Gordon strips and these stories too, where it's going like there's a start and there's an end and there's an actual story being told, as opposed to like a gag strip. Like you spend like half a beat in panel 1 establishing what's been going on,
Yeah.
even if it's just like a half a second, like one dialogue balloon out of 3 or something, like that sort of thing. You advance the story and then you either pay off with a punchline or set up of a cliffhanger or a tease to like bring someone back for the next strip. And like as long as you've got that rhythm going, like you can pull someone through like months worth of strips in like a day. I think I read literally a month worth of strips in an evening for that Flash Gordon book. And like I did a similar thing here too, where I don't think it's the same sort of dramatic tension per strip, but I think there is a good rhythm of setup, narrative, payoff either via a gag or like establishing something that's going to come in the next strip. So I think it's definitely on display here too.
I love there's a repeated like joke in Calvin and Hobbes where Calvin makes these grotesque snowmen all the time, and his parents just like, what is wrong with our child? It's just I love it.
They're
It's
so
probably
good.
like
Yeah.
24 of them. So good.
It's good. I like
Yeah.
the first comics that I sort of ever read, sort of reliably, were like so the kind of tradition in the UK, particularly for kids comics, is kind of like big anthology books where there'll be, sort of each character will get kind of like 1 page or at most kind of 2 pages per issue, and they'll just be kind of gags. There's never kind of continuous stories that go between them. But it meant that like for the first sort of like 10 years of me kind of seriously reading comics, it was mostly just, I guess just sort of like page long strip comics. And so just like the rhythm of it and like the silliness, I guess, that you're encouraged to do. If it's just like, this doesn't have to matter, like nothing that you're doing here, there's no sort of real consequences to
Yeah.
to the emotional lives of the characters for what you're doing, so you can just be big and silly and weird and go for just what's the funniest sight gag that we can go for. Yeah, so that sorry, I'm enjoying. This is the Far Side one, is it?
The humor of Far Side
Yeah, I
is
love
just like
Far Side.
so exactly my humor.
Yeah.
Like it's just
We had some Far Side
and I
books
love how
at
like
home.
dark it gets at times. It's just like this is one of my favorite one. The next one I'm posting, where it's just a scientist with formaldehyde creatures,
Oh, and then Jiminy.
and he's singing to himself, "When you wish upon a star." It doesn't make any sense until you look down at the table, and he's got a jar labeled field cricket, and you can see little Jiminy Cricket's spats in his hat floating on top of the formaldehyde.
Yeah.
Oh god, that makes me laugh so hard.
Far Side, I think, was like some of my first exposure to kind of just like absurdism as well. Like Far Side, we had like a couple of like collections of those. I'm gonna see if I can remember my favorite one, which I think was about cavemen. So I'm just gonna Google Far Side cavemen, and we'll see what happens. There's a lot of ones about
While we're
cavemen.
doing that, I can vamp a little bit. Because like the Far Side strips always make me think of the Every Story Ever specials on War Racket Ajax,
About
where
cow
they're like
tools.
trying to rank all this like every story. Yeah, cow tools, I think specifically is what I was thinking of, but like
Cow tools,
so
yes.
eventually people start to like test the boundaries of the list and like what it can absorb, sort of the same way we are here a little bit, but not to the same extreme. But like so people sent in cow tools to be ranked as a story, like against stories. And, like this is why, Pat, when we were talking about ranking stories for the podcast for the 50th episode, I was like, we can't do it. It's two apples to oranges. There's no way to do it.
Cow
because
tools has to
eventually
be in
we're
top 10. Has to be top 10.
this is where we're gonna break down. But tools of the common crow.
I love Far Side. Bummer of a Birthmark Hal is also a really good one.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Far Side's great.
So I guess I was gonna maybe jump us into recommendations. It seems like we're kind of already doing it, honestly. So, Pat, would you say it's safe to recommend someone Far Side strips if they enjoy Moomin strips, provided they're not a child?
I don't think there's like you're saying. I don't think there's quite like in the fact that if you have an appreciation for comics, yes, I think everyone should try Far Side. But
I mean,
I think
to me there's the same level of absurdity, which maybe it doesn't track for you, but like the weird like leaps in logic and characters going 110% in Moomin tracks to me in the same way of like the absurd humor of Far Side, where it just kind of requires you to be thinking a little bit differently.
I never got the sense that Far Side was trying to like world build. It's just
no. It's a different thing still.
This is
definitely.
a joke
like,
that I'm
no
telling in the
happening.
medium of comic. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think if you like the narratives here, you will like the gags there, I guess is what I would be thinking.
Sure.
But you might disagree with me. All right. Fair.
I would think jumping over to Peanuts comic strips would be an easier transition. I was trying to think what is the closest Western comic strip that would have a similar.
I was thinking about that too, and I was also landing on Peanuts just because I think the characters make a lot of like odd emotional decisions in the same way.
Yeah,
it's definitely not the same sort of like fantasy world, but
no,
I think the characters' motivations are similar. Yeah, go ahead.
Like outside comics, I think Winnie the Pooh is probably the closest. That's more wholesome, I guess. It doesn't have like the dark tones that Moomin does.
I think that's a really interesting comparison. I think it probably works particularly well because the original Winnie the Pooh books I read to my son before he was born, just to sort of like get used to reading out loud again, and they are vicious. Like there are so many times where people are like, I mean, that's sort of stuffed animals, so they're not like planning to kill each other, but like frequently trying to just like get rid of each other, sort of through fairly kind of underhand and sort of like quite horrible means. Which I think feels quite Moomin in that respect. Yeah.
Does anyone charge anyone with a tree trunk? So I don't like.
There's one.
I'm sure Rabbit has his moments.
There's one where Rabbit organizes like when Kanga and Roo first moved to the 100 Acre Woods, and like everybody else is just a bit like, ugh, I don't like these new toys. Like, why are they here? They shouldn't be here. And so they decide to sort of try and get rid of them by Rabbit organizes a kidnapping of Rue where they just sort of steal him, and like the idea is that Kang is going to freak out so much that she leaves, and it all goes wrong for Rabbit. But it is like a really sinister, like horrible plot. So yeah. Anyway, sorry. All of that's to say, Pat, I think that's a very good comparison.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was getting similar feels.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't, like, other than basic main character design, Bone, the main characters in that are Moomin-esque to me. That and like the fantasy setting, and then every other comparison falls apart. But I think if you're into more of a structured adventure, Bone is a good jumping off point.
I think it has similar vibes in spots, especially like Phone Bone. Phone Bone could jump right into Moomin Valley.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
What about you, Matt? What would you do? What would your recommendations be?
I mean, I think we already kind of talked about mine. I was also like having a little bit of a struggle. I was landing on Peanuts a little bit. I was thinking maybe about like the Olivia James Nancy stuff. I feel like has sort of the same sort of like escalation. But that's kind of where I was landing. This is, I think, one of the first ones where I was struggling a little bit.
I think for me, I'd written. So there are a couple of just like really obvious ones, which is like particularly I suppose the books are very good, and like they do something that's kind of complementary to these. And I think in particular there's one called Moomin Valley in November, which was the final Moomin book that was written, and does not feature the Moomins at all. It is all about kind of peripheral characters in Moomin Valley sort of being freaked out and sort of sad that they can't find the Moomins anywhere, and sort of having to come to terms with the idea that the Moomins are gone. And it's a really interesting, beautifully written book by Tove Jansson, and just like a fascinating way to end, sort of I don't know, this sort of like commercial juggernaut that she felt trapped in, to do this kind of like really sort of melancholic, final book where the named characters do not appear at all, which I think is super interesting and also really well done. Jansson's kind of prose for adults as well, I think, is really good. Just again, really different, like really, I don't know, but she's just an exceptionally good writer. Just really good adult fiction. Recommend that massively highly. But then, in terms of actual sort of comics, I think the two kind of strips that sort of felt most, I don't know, sort of like interesting and sort of logical jumping off points. One of them was one that I've already mentioned, which is Crazy and Ignatz, which is a much older and I don't know, just like more experimental, more kind of bizarre comic strip that's just about a cat who's in love with a mouse, who sort of usually throws a brick into the cat's head at least once per strip, but just like really, I don't know, just like really fascinating stuff that like as you're looking at it, you sort of cannot believe that. The people used to get away with kind of experimenting that much, and that the mechanics of kind of like newspaper publications could carry something like that for, I think that Crazy Nick Nats ran for about 30 years, which is absolutely bananas to me, because it is, I think it is horrific, like one of the best things I've ever read, but also sort of willfully uncommercial in ways that are really fascinating to me. And then the other one was a much more recent one, which is one called Cul-de-sac, by Richard Thompson, which is possibly much closer to something like Peanuts, but as I mentioned earlier, I've never actually read Peanuts, so this is me just kind of guessing. But it's sort of ran from, was it 2004 to 2012, and is just about kind of like a family, and sort of different strips will follow mostly the children, as they just have these kind of like heightened, exaggerated versions of reality that they're living in, but just really, I don't know, just like tight, good gags, really just well structured, well paced, inventive stuff, and it was just enjoyable modern comic strip, comic strip that I've read. I think, and by modern again, absolutely horrifying that is more than 10 years ago that it ended. But like just but sort of in relative terms, just really really good, really funny stuff. I'd recommend it very highly as well.
With that, gentlemen, I think that's going to do it for this month's discussion of Moomin. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com. You can also find more comics-related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. Cal, thank you for coming on and talking about some wonderful comics with us again. I feel like in the same way that you're kind of like reaching to fill in your own blind spots and find like new avenues or corners of comics that you haven't like really dug into yet. Like you always you always bring us something that I like know about from the periphery, but I haven't like dug into myself, and I always really appreciate that, like getting to dig into something that's like new and unusual. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed this, and I think Pat also enjoyed it, question mark.
I got some Snufkin literature to read after this, so
That's
got some
research.
Can I tell you that before we sign off, because I don't really want to do this too, there's a questions and discussion like guide about like does the volume hold up between volumes, or does the quality hold up between volumes? I would say I did prefer volume 1 if you're like looking at where you're gonna like jump into these Moomin comic strips. And I think part of the reason is just it does give you a little bit more grounding for who some of the main characters are, but also my favorite beat of any of the stories happens in volume 1, where the Moomins have a family helicopter that talks. They fly in the family helicopter that talks over the ocean to some point where like they're making trouble for this helicopter the whole time. I think they get in trouble. They might be like shipwrecked already. I don't know. Or like they basically they piss the helicopter off to the point where the helicopter leaves them. Later in the story, they need to be rescued from being at sea, like when it's turbulent seas. And you're like, how are they going to get out of this one? The Moomin's ancestors shame the family helicopter into going back to pick them up, and it picks them up out of the sea. And I think that's my favorite moment that I know about so far in Moomin lore.
So it's like a Mulan kind of thing going on there. With,
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, like a Mushu if Mushu was a helicopter.
Yeah, Mushu and the
yeah.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. So I would say the quality holds up.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like there is, if you read, I was going to say the next volume's got some really good stuff in it as well. I think it's the volume after that, which is where I think it more or less marries up with the point where Tove Jansson was starting to feel quite trapped in the the I don't know, the commercial pressures and rhythms
grind,
of the things. But I think from volume 4 it starts to get a bit I don't know, like it starts to get a bit more wobbly in terms of I don't know. I think like some of the charm starts to kind of seep out of it a little bit. But the next one, great, and like they're all good, but it's just there's a real kind of energy and specificity to the first few in terms of just how like unhinged they are, but also I think well, for me anyway, it feels really coherent and focused at the same time. Like it's like tonally, it makes perfect sense, even if it is zipping around between sort of whimsy and attempted murder and suicide. But like that all sort of
it's internally consistent while also being bonkers.
yeah.
Hey man, whimsy between suicide and it's where I'm at right now. Let's do it. 2024 Moomin vibes, hardcore. Let's go.
But yeah, no, I'd recommend. I think that there's more good stuff in there, definitely. If anybody had read the first two and then wanted to carry on, I wouldn't discourage that at all.